Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I'm Dean Phillips, and I am your host. Thank you for being here today. Our sponsor is, of course, the Precision Metal Forming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation. We appreciate all their hard work to improve our industry across the broad spectrum of manufacturing. I have the distinct pleasure today of having with me Mark Michalski. He comes to us from, of course, SME, and he is the 2019 SME President. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, thank you for having me on today. I'm really excited for our conversation.
It's great to have you, and always a pleasure. So let's get right into it. What is your big one item that, if you look forward to the destiny of manufacturing or the future of manufacturing, what do you see on the landscape as being the big thing?
Sure. I think this may seem like a squirrely answer, but the reality is I don't think we can predict with any certainty what the future of manufacturing looks like, because things are going to change in a big way. And what I mean by that is I think that manufacturing will continue to become less compartmentalized. Right now, there's a lot of silos in manufacturing. You know, you've got the supply chain, you've got the design engineering people, and the operations people, and they tend to stay in their own little worlds, right? And manufacturing, it looks like kind of a serial process. You know, designs are made, and then supply chain brings in the parts, and operations does their thing, and stuff goes out the door. I've taken to looking at our manufacturing world more like a community than silos we've seen in the past, and I think that's enabled by the ready access to data and the digitization of the industry. We now have IoT and software integrations that were unheard of years ago, so people are seeing information in so close to real time that it enables people in different departments to react more quickly. Also, the additive manufacturing changes will cause us to think differently about how we design and manufacture and deliver products. There's likely a day when we as OEMs will not manufacture our products at all. I think that it's possible that there are some OEMs that are actually just going to sell the rights to digital data that allows the fabricated parts to be made at the point of consumption and then manage that whole transaction through things like supply chain. So specifically, do I know what it looks like? I don't, but I do know that we've got some enabling technologies now that are going to change the world as we know it.
Well, I love that answer of enabling technologies. I think that's one of the things that when I look at smart manufacturing, it's something that I think when you look at it as a whole and all of the processes, that's a great description of where we're headed. So tell me a little bit.
I agree.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So tell me a little bit about your background and how you came to be here.
Well, up until last year, I was the Chief Operating Systems Officer of MKS Instruments. They're a global provider of instruments in the semiconductor, industrial technology, life and health science space. Think of my role there. I was like the CIO for the operations team. I did all of their information systems for the factories, whereas, you know, you had a different team that did things like our finance systems and so on. I left there last year to go on hiatus. I'm devoting my full time now to the SME presidency. Quite an honor to have the role, and I want to take the most of it. For those people who don't know, the SME is a nonprofit association of professionals, educators, and students committed to promoting and supporting the manufacturing industry. We help manufacturers innovate, grow, and prosper by promoting manufacturing technology, developing a skilled workforce, and connecting the manufacturing community. My presidency runs until the end of this year, and after that, who knows what the future is going to bring. I may consult, I may teach, who knows. But one of the things our audience should know is that you and I both serve on the board of directors of SME, and that's how we came to know each other, and it's been a great relationship over the many years we've worked together with SME.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. I've learned so much from you, and I really do appreciate everything that you've done for our industry.
Well, likewise, you too.
So how did you get involved specifically in manufacturing?
Well, I was one of those kids, like many people in our industry, I think can say this, who loved to take things apart to see how they would work, how it worked when I was a kid. I had more than a few disasters that got me in trouble with my parents. So I really started to think about how things went back together after I took them apart. And that started to make me want to love manufacturing. Due to my family considerations, I needed a job right after high school, so I went to work for a fiber optics controls company, making fiber optics and the controls that we used with them. And I made friends with the engineers. Actually, I was kind of a pest, but they took me under their wing and helped me get on the right track. And then I went to school nights, and over the years I've worked making optics, supercomputers, fuel cells, pacemakers. I just really love taking raw materials and adding value no matter what the industry is. So, I guess it was a calling.
Yeah. I think many of us find that path to manufacturing is that what if kind of moment in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What if you had to look back on some of the things that you did at MKS? What would you say is your greatest accomplishment there?
Well, in the last 5 years, I worked there for 13 years. In the last 5 years, I got the opportunity to pull together a team. Quite honestly, it was a skunkworks project where we chartered and put together a team of manufacturing engineers that created an integrated information platform for the factory floor. Actually, it turned out to be it started out as a factory floor solution, but it turned out to be an enterprise solution. We partnered with a small company out of the UK called No Muted that had a product called Visual Factory as the core. And they had a process control suite that used library solutions that we leveraged. Around that same time, web services started to become available to us that allowed us to use the vaults of truth for information as opposed to porting data from one place to another. So we were able to use things like LabVIEW and our Oracle ERP system and even our learning management system in a very transparent way, almost to the point where our users, when interfacing with Visual Factory, didn't really need to know where the data came from. They just asked for it. And then we further took that to the level where we were able to do user-accessible reporting and data, which eliminated the dreaded IT report request. If you've ever, needed information on a Monday and IT has to get it to you, and they say it'll take us 2 weeks to do that. You know what I mean by that?
Oh, yeah.
As it turned out, it was a solution that was widely regarded as best in class by many of some of the larger companies that we work with, and it's still rolling on today. I'm still in touch with the team who helped me work on that, and it's one of my prouder accomplishments.
Great, and one you should be proud of. That's
yeah, I am. Thank you.
That's a challenge in itself. So, tell me, over the next 5 years, what do you see as some of the biggest industry challenges that you expect?
Well, I think the industry challenges are not going to be technology driven, which is kind of a contrary answer for what is kind of a technology podcast we're doing here. But I said in my speech when I accepted the role of SME President that I saw this report in the Huffington Post by the Institute for the Future that stated that 85% of the jobs that will exist in the year 2030 have not even been imagined yet. Mm-hmm. So we don't even know what's going to make up the workforce deficit, and that's a little bit scary. Mm-hmm. An SME colleague of mine, Janine Kuntz, who heads up our Tooling U platform, said in a presentation at FabTech, we need to rethink the human supply chain. And up until that moment, I never really thought of people as the supply chain. But now I realize, as part of the supply chain, but now I realize that it's a really good metaphor for the fact that a supply of well-trained people is as important, if not more important, than any fabricated component of the product. our industry will be challenged by a lack of human skills to keep up with the technology because it's moving so quickly. We're still facing a tremendous amount of headwind in terms of parents and guidance counselors and individuals recognizing that a career in manufacturing is not the dirty, dead-end job that it used to be.
Right.
And so hopefully we can change that through popular media. You know that I'm into cooking, and so I use a lot of food metaphors. And it used to be that becoming a chef was looked down upon. Now chefs are rock stars. Yeah. I like to imagine a world where manufacturing engineers and manufacturing professionals are the next profession of rock stars. Yeah. How cool would it be if we had a show like Chopped, but for manufacturing, a basket of parts, and figure out how to make a product in 20 minutes? I think that would be a really cool thing. And I would think maybe it would change the way people look at manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, I agree. I hate to say this, but I think that some of that has already started to happen, because if you look at the popularity of some of the shows like Mythbusters and like How It's Made and things like that those kinds of shows hopefully will have some impact on our next generation to where they think, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think one of our first rock stars is people like Titan Gilroy.
Yeah,
who's doing a great job making manufacturing accessible. I hope there is more of that.
Yeah. Without question, that is a big challenge. There's not one company I walk in the door at and I don't hear about their workforce challenges. So I agree that the term of workforce has been maybe overused in talking about what you're talking about here, supply chain of personnel and its impact. What do you see as some of the difficult decisions that most of the companies are going to be faced with over the next 60 months?
Well, I think if you believe from timing perspective and some of the indicators we're seeing, we're likely to have, I think, a small upcoming manufacturing recession. Things are starting to slow down a little bit, and I think that's just a natural cycle that happens. I know in the semiconductor industry, we used to deal with it all the time. It's not that the world is coming to an end. It's just, we're making an adjustment. And if that's true, it's likely that some companies will throw training and workforce development, like we discussed, aside. And this is a really bad time to be doing that. The bean counters make that happen, because when things slow down, the first thing you throw overboard is training. But I think that's a real mistake. I think the companies who use the slowdown to train their human capital and upgrade their infrastructure to the new technologies during this adjustment will come out on top. Unless as a company you think that you're going out of business, that you have an existential threat, you should hit the gas. And that will put you in a position when the trend changes and when we're on an upward curve to be able to eat up the market share that others can't do because they're trying to catch up. I think that's going to be a difficult decision that people have to make, but it's one that the smart companies will make.
Yeah, I think if you look at every business book that there is, that's what they instruct you to do, is that when things slow down, this is an opportunity to train. It's an opportunity to expand. And there are very few businesses, though, that seem to have the guts to do that. Let's just put it that way. I think most of the time everyone edges to being on the side of, and I think most of them have the attitude of what you said, which is, I don't know if I'm going to be in business in 5 years with it trending this way.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to work in the semiconductor industry for 13 years, and we knew that it was a cycle that happened. And so being able to predict those cycles, or at least be able to see the leading indicators, gave us a little bit of confidence in knowing that we can just ride this out. We'll be around in 2 years when it's all over. So,
Yep. No, and that's the attitude you have to have, and most businesses should have that. They just, I think sometimes fear overcomes them. Tell me about where you think the challenges are coming for workforce development. What do you see changing to address this?
Well, I think it's actually good. I think it's more of an opportunity than a challenge. We have training that is available in so many different delivery systems that it was in the past. It used to be you really only kind of had a couple of ways to do it. You could either do classroom training or on-site training, or you sent people off to night school or whatever. But digital access to knowledge is everywhere. I can be sitting in an airport taking a class on my cell phone while I'm waiting for an airplane. You've also got available partners. This is the shameless SME plug, but we've got Tooling U SME that provides many types of training by many delivery systems, some off the shelf and some customized for the specific needs of the enterprise. A company that can partner with somebody who can come in and look at your particular situation and then pull down off the shelf the appropriate type of training for your workforce is somebody that a smart company should partner with. There are lots of companies out there who are doing that. I think Tooling U SME is one of the best. But I think that we have an opportunity now to train people in many different ways. I know I'm taking this time while I'm not working I will call it a real job, to learn to do some things that I always wanted to learn how to do in the programming world, and I am doing that by just sitting down in front of my tablet sometimes when I've got 5 minutes to spare. So it's a really great opportunity right now to get people trained in many, many different ways.
Yeah, I agree. What do we do to get a lot of these younger students interested? How do we get them excited, and how do we inspire them for the opportunities that exist in manufacturing?
Well, number one is we need to get the word out that this is not a dead industry, and it is not a dirty, low-paying industry. In fact, like I've mentioned a couple of times, I worked in semiconductor. To go on our production floor, that production floor was a clean room. You had to put on the whole white suit and all of that. So very clean. Most of the jobs that are out there now are going to evolve into STEM-related jobs. You're going to have good math skills, good computer skills. Yeah, it's great to go out there and get an engineering degree, and I certainly encourage that. But I think employers these days are less focused on degrees than they are on skills. So if you can train yourself to write code or use a 3D printer, you understand the idea of analyzing data, and you can fill a wide range of skills, those will be the winners, and those will be who are most sought out. There's a lot of ways to get into this industry. The reality is that manufacturing has really become a place where you can have fun and work on the coolest leading edge technology that's out there. It's much better than sitting in a service industry where you're just looking at spreadsheets and crunching numbers. There's nothing more fun than taking technology and creating something with it. So I think if we can get that message out to the younger audience, and we can overcome some of the parents who don't want their kids to go into the industry, I think that's a problem as well.
Yeah. Yes. Why, when you think about a lot of these manufacturing companies, what do you think are the challenges that they see with recruitment? Why do they exist? Why are they struggling so much?
Well, I think part of it is what I was just talking about in terms of the industry has changed and we need to get the word out on that. But I think that they also need to realize that the future workforce, and to a large degree the present workforce, is not really interested in just filling a seat for a paycheck. The workers of the future want to be constantly learning. They want to feel like they're part of a larger world where they understand what their contribution is. The millennials right now are very much contribution-based. And so the products that are being put out there, if you're working in the medical world, right, you're saving lives, or if you're working. My son is an engineer, and he worked for a company that was doing water desalinization. When you asked him what he was doing, he talked about the fact that he was bringing fresh water to places there that fresh water didn't exist. And people don't change jobs now for a pay increase. What they change jobs now is for a fulfillment increase. And so, I really think that if companies reach out to their employees and make them part of the bigger picture and make sure that they're learning and advancing all the time, they'll have a much better job with recruitment and retention than just throwing money at the problem.
What advice do you think that you can give to a lot of these employers across manufacturing of how they can prepare while they're hiring these new workers over the next 5 years?
Well, I think working with the school systems directly is a really good idea. I happen to be on the advisory board for a technical school here in Lexington, Massachusetts, and we've been partnering with local companies to ask them, what do you need in the future? And so that process actually needs to go all the way back to the grade schools. You were with SME long enough to know that we started our engagement programs in college years ago, and we realized that was too late. If you get kids in college, they've already decided what we want to do. So, having kids sit down and look at how it's made or that kind of thing is a great thing. If you've got a factory that is tour friendly, go to a school, bring kids in, show them what the industry looks like. Actually, bring the parents in and show them what the industry looks like. Start apprentice programs. One of the things that fell by the wayside here in the United States is apprentice programs. They do it a lot in Europe, and I think that's a great way to get people involved. And make your training programs fun, and make sure that they're well financed. Mm-hmm. Let's make sure that the world understands that manufacturing is a desirable, financially rewarding, and fulfilling industry. Make the workforce rock stars. Make them understand that they are the future of the United States, and I think we can get them into the industry.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that, because when I started and I was in high school, I went to a vocational high school, and mm-hmm. you see so few of those even around anymore. They're starting to develop this new interest in that, though, and I really wish it had never gone away. My school that I went to became a magnet school for math. Not that that's a bad thing, but it took away all these skills of learning refrigeration, learning machining, learning electronics, computer science, all of those things that I learned in high school, AC circuitry. Those things I learned in high school. But
yeah, well, one of the things that the particular school I'm working with is doing is looking at how they integrate all the different trades into what looks like a company. And companies have also told us that technical schools who can teach soft skills like lean and data analysis concepts will differentiate their students from just somebody who just knows how to program a CNC machine.
Yeah.
So industry partnerships with schools is really important on the go forward.
I agree with that. And I really like your idea, and I've heard a lot of good responses from some of the places that do this, which is bringing in the parents along with the students. I think that is critical, again, to have the support, the family support, to believe that, hey, go for it. Go and be in this industry. Go and be a leader and take this opportunity. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for leadership in this, in our careers in manufacturing. So how did you get, what was your calling into manufacturing?
Well, I think I talked about it earlier that I guess I was born to be in manufacturing, because I started taking stuff apart, but at a really young age, and then it evolved from there. But I never get tired of seeing the product ship. And one of my favorite stories is about when I worked for a company called Zoll Medical, and we made cardiac care devices, defibrillators and pacemakers and that kind of thing. And whenever I was having a tough day, there was this big board in our cafeteria that had letters from nurses and doctors and patients testifying to the fact that our product saved their lives.
Yeah.
And I would go in there after a few tough moments, and I would read those letters, and I would go back to my office and knew that I was doing something important. But honestly, I did spend some time on the design side, but I found myself going back to the manufacturing floor all the time. Not to disparage my designer friends, because I love them dearly, but I was never really impressed because you could make one thing in a lab. I was more impressed by the people who can make them by the thousands, and I guess that was a part of my calling.
I like that differentiation there between the two. Which I'm sure that if Steve Jobs was still around, he would disagree with you completely. Because he was such a
Steve
fanatic.
Jobs' stuff doesn't get. Yeah, but it takes people who can make millions of iPhones to be able to proliferate the technology.
Exactly. It wouldn't mean anything if you made one of them.
Exactly.
Hey, tell me a little bit about some of the technology sectors that are showing promise here for the next 5 years.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is we're going to see a couple of different changes. One of them is with the advent of 3D printing. My wife works for a 3D printing company called Desktop Metal, so I listened quite intently to what they're doing over there. And one of the things they're really focusing on is not just the machines that do the printing itself, but also the material science that goes into it. And we've kind of made tremendous strides in the printing space, but we've got an opportunity now to take the leash off of some of material science as well as the geometry of parts. And I think that is where the technology is going to need new and different ideas to take just the idea of printing a part and bringing it to the next level. So I think that'll be a new wave of things that we see. People who are getting into material science, people who are doing different things with geometry. I believe you were there at Rapid where we saw the technology that goes into football helmets now, which is largely enabled by the fact that we've taken the leash off of the geometry of fabricating parts because we can print them now in new and different ways. And we can use new materials that we could not machine or fabricate before. And so it's going to change the way we think about designing parts. So that's really promising.
Yeah, I've heard from like Amy Elliott was on the show before, and Lonnie Love from Oak Ridge National Lab, and that was one of their big important things that they were really focused on is the changes in material science are going to make these things that we build able to fit into so many more markets than they do now because the strength and flexibility and structure limits them currently. But if we can do some things on the material science side, the sky's the limit.
Absolutely. So I think that's really showing some promise.
Yeah. The in an article that the PMA had out over the last year, they were saying if you want to attract millennials into the industry, that you have to embrace mobility, mobile technology, apps, and things like that. What are your thoughts on some of that?
I think I see that happening already. I think apps that allow for collaboration via a mobile device have really taken a foothold among millennials. When you really think about, sort of project management, sending emails is so yesterday. People now are used to quick bursts of information like text and so on. So you've got apps that are using that same type of technology in the project management space. Mm-hmm. You've got IoT apps now that allow a CNC machine to be able to send you information while you're sitting at lunch if it needs to have an adjustment. And that's really going to change the way we think about getting information. I mentioned earlier that, I take classes now in free downtime from my cell phone. So the days of kicking around with a laptop, or worse, being tied to a desktop computer, it was really so last decade. And I think having information available to you at all times via apps and mobile devices is really the thing of the future.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, I think we're just about out of time here, Mark. I really do appreciate you being here on the show. Always a pleasure, sir. And
I had a great time. Thank you very much for asking me, and keep up doing the great work with these podcasts.
Oh, thank you. How do people get in touch with you, Mark?
I can be reached at markmitch2011@gmail.com. That's MARK2011@gmail.com.
Excellent. Now, I also want to thank everybody out there for listening, and thanks to our sponsor, the Precision Metal Forming Association, and the PMA's Educational Foundation for helping us put this show on. If you want to listen to some of the past shows, you can listen to them, of course, through longevityindustries.com or any of your present podcast hosts, Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, radio, whatever you feel is your favorite. And, of course, you can reach me, Dean, at longevityindustries.com. Thanks, everybody.